Welcome back to Healing the Tigress, a podcast of stories and conversations on Asian American Pacific Islander maternal mental health. It's Peggy here with a special message. Today's episode is a special one because we wanted to dedicate it to a friend and hula sis of mine, who was also named Jasmine, not to be confused with our own co-host Jasmine. Jazz was an amazing mother and friend who I met through hula. Earlier this year, she tragically lost her life, and my hula Halauan community will forever be changed by this loss. She was an early supporter of Healing the Tigress, and we have always wanted to make sure we represented all AAPI mothers on this podcast, including folks of Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander heritage. Jazz's family hailed from the Big Island in Hawaii, and I know she would have absolutely loved this episode. Today's guest is representing our kanaka maoli and other Pacific Islander mothers, and what better episode to dedicate to Jazz than this one? Sis, we miss you so much. Until we meet again.
There are more than 30,000 islands in the Pacific that are home to people that identify as Pacific Islander or Pasifika. These island groups are known as Melanesia, Micronesia, and Polynesia, which include countries like Samoa, Tonga, Fiji, and the Kingdom of Hawaii. In the U.S., there are about 1.4 million people who identify as Pacific Islander. However, when it comes to perinatal health, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Office of Minority Health reported that Pacifica mothers were 4.6 times more likely to receive late or no prenatal care compared to white mothers. The Office of Minority Health also reports that Pacifica are 3 times less likely to receive mental health services or receive prescription medications for mental health treatment as compared to their white counterparts.
This is why today's guest is such a valuable part of our conversation here at Healing the Tigress. Our guest today is Dr. Kalena Kaopuuokalani Lanuza. Kalena is a kanaka maoli, which means Native Hawaiian or Indigenous Hawaiian, and she is also doctorally prepared certified family and psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner and certified lactation counselor. She specializes in reproductive psychiatric mental health and cares for Native Hawaiian and Pasifika wāhine in Hawaii and throughout the diaspora in Washington, Oregon, and California. She provides medication, herbal and supplement management, therapy, and lactation support to those in need. Kalena, mahalo for being here today and for being a voice and advocate for our Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander friends and family. Please tell us a little bit more about your cultural background and your motherhood journey.
So mahalo nui, everybody, and mahalo to Peggy and Jasmine and the podcast. I'm honored to be here and to be a representative of Native Hawaiians and the Pasifika folks. I think I'm your first guest in that cohort, so super humbled and honored again. My background is, again, you said that I am kanaka maoli. My ohana is from the moku of Maui and Molokai. My family goes back 7 generations in Lahaina, Maui.
Wow.
And my father came to the United States. I used to say that he moved here when I was younger, but now really looking at everything all told, we realized, no, his parents were economic refugees. Our country was illegally overthrown by the United States of America in 1893, and consequently our way of life as people was really devastatingly impacted. And so several generations fast forward, folks who were normally tenders of the aina or the land and the kai or the sea couldn't really do those things anymore. And so they had to figure out ways to survive. So my father moved to the United States, to California when he was young, again with his parents, trying to be able to survive and make a living. And I was actually born on Chumash territory, and I still am a settler on Chumash Aina in the Southern California region. as a kanaka maoli growing up in the diaspora, it was always, very important for my father and for the other family members that came over to instill in us our kuleana and our kulana as kanaka maoli. So that's our responsibility and our roles as members of the lahui, even though we were separated by water from our people. And so although I've grown up on someone else's territory, I've always tried to stay close to what it means to be a Native Hawaiian. And so as I started to grow and learn more about my people, I was able to move home for a while and work there and live there and swim in our oceans and eat from our ainan. And those things filled me up so much. And I was so grateful for that opportunity. But found myself back to where really my key support systems were, again, back in the Southern California region. And that's where I became a mom. And I, like many of the folks that listen to your podcast or who have been guests on your podcast previously, I also went through my own challenges with mental health during my motherhood journey. I had a lot of perinatal anxiety when I was pregnant with my child, and then also after I gave birth to him. And one of the things that I noticed was that when I finally was able to have the courage to reach out for help, nobody looked like me here. And because of the barriers that we have in place in the country, I was not able to see somebody back home in Hawaii if I wanted to for mental health care, just because of the state statutes and laws. And so it was a challenge for me to go through motherhood and to have really big feelings and big questions, and not have my sort of like a cultural congruent space to come into. So I sought out just general help from white therapy partners. And I think they did their best in trying to help me. And I did my best just to muddle through it. But fast forward 10 years, my son is 10, and now doing what I do with the folks that I do that with, so kanaka maoli and other Pasifika, I now know that, there was a large gap in what I probably needed and didn't receive. So that's just a little bit more about me as a kanaka, where I sit right now, where I'm settling, kind of what happened to me in my early motherhood time period.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And, becoming a mother is hard enough in itself. And so many things that we go into it, we think we might have this image of it, and we're never really truly prepared. And then to add on another layer of, the cultural differences and trying to have somebody walk you through that when they don't truly understand all the grief and the trauma that your family has suffered through. It can be, there's this discrepancy. And so, in your postpartum experience, I think in our pre-interview conversations, you mentioned that you had to really strongly advocate for yourself to get the treatment that you needed for your perinatal anxiety. And even, I think you mentioned like some sort of postpartum OCD was what you ended up coming to conclusion with. As a mental health provider yourself, how did you notice those symptoms showing up for you? And what kind of treatment did you seek out or was offered to you?
So thanks for the question. I was an NICU nurse when I gave birth to my son. And so my lived reality, I was working in a big trauma center at the time. My lived reality was that like everything was going to be, quite possibly horrible in the newborn period.
Yeah.
And so when my son had a lot of reflux and apnea and was turning blue, my brain took that to a whole nother level. He was also tongue-tied, and nobody really helped me with that. Ironically, I was just starting a position on the breastfeeding coalition in my town at the time and learning more about that, but really was just kind of pushed aside from my colleagues who were my friends, pediatricians who I chose to be my son's pediatrician, saying it was fine. So the combination of tongue tie, the apnea, the blue spells, feeding challenges, breastfeeding challenges, and of course, the complete lack of sleep, which we all know is the secret sauce to mental health in the postpartum period. All of those things really kind of, came together in this wonderful storm and really had me upside down. And so I knew that I was not okay, and I was supposed to go back to work as an NICU nurse, after my 6 weeks of postpartum that we all get, right? No, not that all of us get, but that ones who are fortunate in the United States get. So I was supposed to go back, and I went back to my OBGYN to let her know that I was just having, really vivid images in my mind of really horrible things happening to my baby. I couldn't sleep. I was just so jittery. I was just a mess. I was not myself. And she told me that I just needed to get out, maybe take the baby to the mall, and maybe go to the pier. We live in an ocean area. Maybe go to the pier. It happens to everybody. It happened to her, but I just need to get out, and I just need to go back to work. And so I did that. And I ended up back at work in the NICU. And I remember there was a 24-weeker that came into our unit, and I was the nurse, and I had to start an IV line. And I had worked as an NICU nurse for 10 years. I could start an IV on anyone. I was like one of those nurses that had honed my skills. I froze and I could not insert the IV. And I was looking up at my other colleagues who had, were my friends, and I was crying and I just couldn't do it. And I didn't know why I couldn't do it. And I thought, oh my gosh, what's wrong here? I wasn't able to connect the dots, but I did know oh, this is just horribly wrong. Something is just not right. So I quit my job.
Wow. Good for you.
I didn't even have, again, here's where privilege comes in. I was partnered. My partner had a job, maybe not enough to support us, who knows, but I just said, I'm not doing this. This doesn't feel right. And I reached out to all my friends and was like, do you think I'm crazy? What's going on? And they finally recommended that I see a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. And again, at the time, I was an NICU nurse. I just finished my nurse practitioner program as a family nurse practitioner, but wasn't working at one. Knew nothing about mental health, really. And I went to go see her. She was a midwife / psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. So lucky to get in to see her. And she was like, oh, this is what you're going through. You need to be on disability for a little bit longer. Maybe we need to talk about some medicine. Maybe you need to go to therapy. And so I remember when I was in my OB's office, just to back up a little bit, and her telling me that, you just need to get over it. I was like, I just think if I could just get a little bit more sleep, I'd be okay. Is there anything else that you can do? And she said, no, I can't extend your disability. There's nothing wrong. You need to go back to work. And I just remember just sitting there being so deflated, I don't see this going well. But again, I literally just couldn't speak for myself. And this is coming into it with, I had my son late. I was 40 when I had my son. I was a master's prepared, brand new nurse practitioner. I'd worked 10 years in the NICU. I knew how to advocate. I'd sit on boards. I did all these things. And yet my mouth would not say the words. There was so much power differential, and the vulnerability that I had at that time was profound. And so for this woman to say that to me, and with that power differential, I was just like, okay, this is what I need to do. So anyways, when I finally sat with that psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner and listened to what she said, it was a blur, but I was grateful for the extended little bit of extra time that I was able to have. I went and I spoke with someone who was a counselor. It didn't help that much, I'll say. That's where that cultural congruence was. There wasn't any, but she tried her best. And I muddled through that time period. It wasn't until much later, until 3 or 4 years ago, when I was finally able to, as a Native Hawaiian woman sitting in the state of California, find another Native Hawaiian therapist, that I was actually able to have somebody help me break down what happened culturally and maybe what I would have needed during that time. But again, those barriers across the ocean, Even if I wanted to now, I couldn't get a therapist in Hawaii. I don't live there.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't until much, much later that I was able to really start to heal. So you imagine going through almost 6.5 to 7 years of motherhood, still having trauma, still having, all of these things, putting it all together and doing what you can, but never really fully being able to unpack that until you meet somebody and you look in their eyes and you're like, oh my, I don't need to explain this to you, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was able to do that deeper work.
Yeah.
So that was again, I really had to advocate for myself, but I didn't know how or I couldn't. And the system around me really was just doing its thing that it was created to do, pump you in, pump you out. And if you fit into this model of, the expert, you screen, brief intervention, refer, my OB didn't do any of that, but just say she did, I'd go and I'd maybe get better. In my case, I didn't get better.
Mm-hmm.
I just made do.
Mm-hmm.
And hence now, this is why I do what I do.
Mm-hmm. At the time when you found, or when someone was like, you need to see a psychiatric mental health specialist, was there a thought that crossed your mind that like, is there a better fit for me? Should I find someone who's Native Hawaiian? Or maybe that was part of the piece that you hadn't put together yet back then?
Yeah, it's a great question. I didn't put that together back then. I was in such a state of disarray that I was just trying to survive.
Yeah.
I really didn't know how to get through the next day. And so, my friends, again, another element of privilege here. I was a nurse and a well-known nurse in the community within the mother-baby world. And so I had so many friends in this county, and I called so many people. And so they were able to link me with this person. That person was so random. Not everybody gets linked with her, but I was able to see her, thankfully. But no, I didn't think to myself, oh, I'd rather have somebody that was kanaka at that time. I just needed anybody to just, a human, to validate my experience.
Had you done therapy at any point up until that moment?
I had done some therapy earlier in life when I had some depression or some anxiety, big life changes, going into school or college or things like that. But those were really just surrounding those particular instances. So nothing deeper.
Right.
It wasn't really until I became a mom to a Native Hawaiian boy, and I started really understanding the plight of our people right now. I'll say that one pivotal moment was Mauna Kea and what happened on Mauna Kea in 2019 when more telescopes wanted to be put there and all of, everybody in Hawaii and abroad kind of came home and were like, no more. That really was a pivotal moment for me. And that really made me think, here I am, I'm a mom, I'm raising this new life. And our people and our aina are constantly, every day, being bombarded. I need to really dig my heels in here and really understand how this affects me as a human, how this affects our people, how this intergenerational and historical trauma has really stalled us from being able to be activated in a way that's healthy. So I really started to get into all of those things then, and then started to realize the importance of cultural congruence in healing. But until then, I mean, by just a product of my father did the best that he could to raise me in a Hawaiian way. But he also, I think, knew that to survive in the continent, you need to assimilate. If you were to look at my father and you were to watch the movie Moana, my father looks like that man. Like he is a big Polynesian man, right? And so to come to the United States, he needed to do everything that he could to make friends and assimilate and just be as Western as possible. And so I didn't even really understand the difference and that there would be a difference and that I really needed my own people and then I really needed to connect culturally with somebody on that level until all of these bigger things started to happen, if that makes sense.
Yeah. There's a theme of like immigration almost, because I feel like we feel that too as our parents who came from, Taiwan to here and felt like we needed to assimilate, or at least they felt like they needed to in order to let their children become successful in this land. That they really did not know very much about, and we look different, right? We look completely different.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a huge thing. And what stood out to me when you were talking about this experience of motherhood and finding the help that you needed was how important representation was. And that's also something you didn't even realize was that important until you became a mom, which is like, you did therapy before, but none of that really, that cultural difference maybe didn't really matter until this point where it all just builds up, right? It's so important now, this point and stage in your life where, like you said, you're raising another life.
Right.
How are you going to go forward and do this in the best way possible if you cannot, come to terms with some of the traumas that have occurred before you? And again, it is a privilege that we get this time now to do so, so that our children don't have to keep continuing and taking on that burden of that trauma.
Yes.
So I love everything you just shared and can sort of resonate with so much of what you said.
Yeah.
The other thing that I wanted to maybe bring out was, you're sharing your experience about, the cultural clashes, and we shared some statistics about the impact of perinatal care and mental health across Pasifika in the U.S. Are there some themes you notice among your patients who maybe come to you after unsuccessful treatment with less culturally congruent providers?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I think now that, I think our people are in this space now where we're really having a reckoning with a deeper understanding of, what happened to our country and what's continuing to happen. And so I spoke a little earlier about historical trauma and what that means. And in our culture, so we didn't learn Olelo Hawai'i. We didn't learn Hawaiian. It was banned until the 1970s. Our language was banned. You had to, until 1970, name your child a Christian first name. You could name it a middle name of, whatever, but Hawaiian, but the first name had to be that. My great grandmother was beaten for speaking Hawaiian. And so, the system worked to do what it aimed to do, and that was to turn us, just like many Native Americans with boarding schools, into Americans. And so when my grandmother was born, my father's mother, she didn't speak Hawaiian. So my father didn't speak Hawaiian. Thankfully, my father was an entertainer and he learned all the Hawaiian songs, and I was a hula dancer almost all my life. So I learned Olelo that way. And thankfully we were allowed, quote unquote, to have those songs. But all of that and that degradation of who we are as people through removal of our language, removal of our religion, removal of our names, removal of the close ties that kept us okay, mental health wise, over time, created, in us, big, huge vulnerabilities, right? And that's why we see all these huge disparities. And so now, when Makuahine, who is kanaka maoli, comes and sits with me, and we sit together and we try to unpack, what she's going through in, the 2-week postpartum period or 1 month or whatever it is, or when she's up high or pregnant, it's not just about the stuff that you learn in your postpartum support international certification course. It's deep. It's, these feelings, this grief, this communal trauma that you're experiencing. We call it kaumaha, this grief. This is because of these things. So it's almost a history lesson for both of us. We have to go back and really understand, again, what happened and unpack some of that. And then also, especially if they're living in Hawaii, they are bombarded with settler colonialism. There's only 20% of people in the state of Hawaii are kanaka maoli now. Over 50% of us are outside of of Hawaii, of our islands, and are in the continental United States or somewhere else. And so there's that we have to get into, all while looking at okay, how can we get more sleep? These are why you're having these intrusive thoughts. Maybe we could use some of these herbs or some of this medicine. Here's a little bit of cognitive behavioral stuff. Here's some interpersonal relationship stuff. Here's a little trauma therapy to erase some of the traumatic things that are coming up that are triggering PTSD. So it's very, very layered. And so this is sitting with my people. This is what makes that so profoundly different from, again, sitting with a Western trained therapist, or maybe even somebody who is not of that background, because all of these deep things, we can't just know. They're not just something that we read. We need to understand them deeply together. We need to feel these things together in order to heal each other. My private practice is called Mana Mental Health. In the, like the greater Pacific area or Polynesia for sure, Mana is like this innate power or energy. And when I sit, especially with other wāhine, it is that exchange of mana back and forth. And so in doing that, in going through our history and learning all the things, we also tap into our indigenous wisdom. We also tap in to all the mo'olelo or stories, to all the olelo no'eau or the sayings, to all of our moku'auhau, our genealogy, remembering our strength and our resilience to get each of us through. Because if she's not doing well, I'm not doing well as another kanaka maoli. So, and I say that with all moms anyway, but I there's this much deeper level that this gets to when I'm sitting with my people. But we have to feel those things, and we have to come up with ways that are outside of the Western paradigm of, what you think is how you feel, and how you feel is how you act, and all that kind of stuff, to get her into a space where she can stand and she can be cool. Who is like to stand strong, because if she cannot feel that, where are we? Right. So that's the goal. And whenever I'm serving anyone, that's the goal. But the way that we get there with other of my people anyway, is to unpack all this stuff, remember where we come from, and take on a whole different worldview to support each other. So I know I kind of rambled all around, but I hope that answered your question a little bit more and shed some more light on how it's different.
It's very different.
Yeah.
It's the erasure, it's the loss, it's the grief, it's the trauma. And, we store that and we don't even realize that we're doing that.
Right.
I also feel like it's like trying to fit a round peg in a square hole, like the Western continental system, like the healthcare system and everything is really not designed for people of color in general, I feel like.
No.
And then I think especially with the history of Hawaii, I think, like you said, there is that distinguishing, because I'm sure there are probably white folks that are like, what are you talking about? Hawaii is a U.S. state. And you're like, no. There's so much more history behind that people don't recognize and realize in the same way that we think about Native American history in the very similar themes of that. I don't know how many of our listeners know that history. And there's a song that I absolutely love, Hawaii 70. Have you heard that song before? And
yes, many times.
And there's like a remake of it with have you heard the remake with there's like some schools from Hawaii that's like the children sing.
Yes.
That one brings me to tears.
Yes,
but the lyrics go, if just for a day our king and queen would visit all these islands and saw everything, how would they feel about the changes of our land? And it goes on and says, would they cry for I'm reading this and getting chills. Would they cry for the land that was taken away? And people don't realize how Hawaii became with, I'm putting up quotation marks, people can't see that, became a U.S. state. And you mentioned that a little bit with your work with your patients and folks, but especially if they, like yourself, may not have been born in like your homeland, but are kind of dealing with that trauma. Like, what does that actually look like? And if you can maybe, I don't mean to put you on the spot, do a history lesson per se, but kind of explain that and what that means and looks like for so many of your folks.
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier, 1893, that's when the illegal annexation happened of Hawaii from the United States. The United States military illegally overthrew our queen, imprisoned her in her home, and that's Iolani Palace. So if you ever go, you can see that and hear that. Take that walking tour. It's very enlightening. To this day, that annexation by many kanaka maoli has been seen as being illegal. They didn't go through all of the formal channels to annex a place. The vast majority of kanaka maoli at that time, including my grandparents, signed the Ku'e petition. Ku'e means to resist, and did not want the United States to take over Hawaii. Again, so that was done illegally. There are many people working to try to regain our sovereignty. The United Nations recognizes us still as a sovereign nation. And so in that, and that song by the Makaha Sons of Ni'ihau at the time, that was Israel Kamaka Viva Ole, singing that song. Uncle Israel used to come here to the continent. I remember, the Makaha Sons being here many, many times. They were friends with my father and many of the Kanaka that were here. We were so fortunate to grow up with them, and they'd come about every year and do concerts and things. So, being around, him, he was a very, very staunch advocate of our sovereignty or of our ea. So just knowing that right there, and also knowing that, again, Hawaii is still illegally occupied by the United States military. So we have huge that are continuously bombing our land and our sacred places, wanting to put telescopes on sacred places. Missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls is much higher. The vast majority are military. The vast majority of offenders are military. So knowing all these things, and then servicing, Hawaiians is important, because those things do come into the mix. They affect you, especially if you're living back home. As far as, like the little history lesson too, I think I was doing a podcast with Dr. Kat. She has the Mom and Mind podcast. Yeah, we did that maybe a year or two ago. And I was telling her that in all my life, anybody that ever came to me and we were talking and, they knew that I am of Hawaii, they would say things like, "Oh, I love Hawaii. Like, I go vacation there. I have timeshare there. We got married there. My daughter's going to school there, whatever." But nobody, Hawaii is their playground, but Hawaii to us is our sacred space. It's we as Indigenous people are connected to that aina. Haloa, the kalo plant, was our first ancestor. So it's so deep, right? And just to hear folks or see luau's, people putting on luau's with their fake leis and appropriating our culture, all these things. Nobody in my entire history had ever said to me anything about any of that I just mentioned. The overthrow, the continued crazy, out of control tourism, settler colonialism. One person only had said to me ever, like, "Oh my gosh, people, like, you guys have gone through so much." Out of my entire existence of almost a half a century on this planet. And again, I think people are very well-meaning, but they literally have no idea about, what we are going through as people. So all of those things affect our baseline mental health as humans. And then when we mother and come into that whole space, wow, it's such a different story. So, to answer the question that's in Hawaii 78, would they cry? Would they be proud? Would they be happy to look at all the asphalt and everything? For sure they'd cry. For sure they'd be dismayed. We are dismayed. Those are our kupuna, our ancestors, our mo'i. We now, the living people here now, whether we're abroad or on that actual aina, it's big grief every day to see what has happened, to our place.
And you said like only 20% in Hawaii now is Kanaka.
By design. By design. When you take a people's language, when you create things like the Hawaiian Homestead Act that says that you can only have land if you're 50%, well, over time, you can, you can't marry, over time, you have less and less. And so, yes, we cannot, the average price of a home in Hawaii is over $1 million for a little rinky-dink junk place. I even, as a kanaka, I cannot go home anymore. I have to go and stay in Waikiki. It's horrible to do that for me. It's so sad. I have to mentally prepare myself. I have to mentally prepare my child every time we go. But that's what we've gotten to. So again, is all hope lost? No, No, we're going to go down to the last person, ku'eing our way through this and saying no more. Ole, enough is enough. But again, how does this all come into play? It all intersects with our being and who we are as people and what we think and how we feel, right? So all of our mental health is affected by all of these other big things.
Yeah. How do you see this uniquely manifest itself in the mothering, in a new kanaka mom who's maybe let's say she's out here in California or in Oregon, displaced, right? Like, how does that come up in the motherhood journey for a lot of them?
Yeah, one good thing that I see, and I'll start on a positive note now because we've been talking a lot about the negative, but one thing that I see is that moms who are Native Hawaiian, who are either in Hawaii or outside Hawaii, but especially I see the ones outside Hawaii, are so focused on learning Olelo Hawaii at any cost. And now there's so many different platforms to do that, teaching their children about what it means to be kanaka and also teaching their children what it means to be a settler. Because we're all settlers if we're here, right? So teaching that and really, really doing their best to stay as connected to the lahui in any way they can. So that's been beautiful. And the social media, for all its like bad things, it's been wonderful for us to be able to connect. But I will say, there is that the other side of the coin, there is that deep loss of like, okay, maybe if I want them to connect to their ancestral foods, where do we get that? No joke. In order like to get kalo is taro poi, in order to get that easily in Southern California, for my Southern California and even Northern California moms, the best route is to go through Las Vegas. So like, so it's a constant, like it's difficult to try to stay connected to our herbs, to our foods, all those things. But I see it coming out that way of like this little light turned on that says, I need to, if I haven't already, I need to get back to my roots. I have to do that. It's almost like this calling where every mom is like, I need to plug in somehow or another, yet still realizing the reality of what that looks like. Right. Plugging in is not so easy, especially in different places. But I see that. Also, in just general mothering, really, again, it's a lot of trauma work that we have to do. I'm not trained in, a bunch of different trauma modalities. I'm trained in accelerated resolution therapy. I've been using it with the maoli survivors. But, trying to get them in to maybe do some EMDR or some brain spotting around deeper issues has been helpful too. But yeah, it's lots of trauma and lots of trying to reconnect all at the same time.
Yeah. Wow.
I like that you sort of mentioned about the food, the herbs, those things that really bring you back to your culture and maybe the way you were brought up to use these certain things. And you remember like, I want that now as a mother, right?
Yes.
And so I know part of the work that you do includes not just medication management, but herbal and supplemental medication too. I actually had a complementary alternative medicine professor in pharmacy school who was very interested in Chumash medical practices. Okay. And we actually did like a hike one time to Eaton Canyon and like he was showing us certain herbs and plants and things to look for. And so this is very, I think it's very sacred. Yeah. Because of the things that, from generation past on a generation, there's a reason people use these things, right?
Yes.
And so can you tell us a little more about this sort of the herbal and supplement management that you do? And is it rooted in Native Hawaiian traditions and history?
Sure. So I am not a la'au practitioner. So la'au lapa'au is using the plants to heal. I'm not a la'au practitioner, but I do refer. I specifically refer to Pua Pinto. She's on the island of Oahu, and she is a la'au practitioner. Specific, like one of her specialties, which is beautiful too, is that she has a very deep understanding of Oiwi or Native Hawaiian birth practices. And so she she's probably in court today because there's a law in Hawaii that unless you're a Western trained midwife, you cannot do traditional midwifery or any traditional birth practices unless you're certified in like these very Western modalities. So, having your certified nurse midwifery or whatever. So they're in court today because they're suing the state of Hawaii for that. That's just a little aside. But she is so well versed in la'au for pregnancy and all the different ailments. So I'll refer to her to that. I use things that are pretty more common and that are going to be safe no matter what. I love mamaki. Mamaki is a nettle that is only of Hawaii. It's not a stinging nettle. It's a different kind. It has such a calming effect on the nervous system. And so I use it for my moms a lot in the form of a tea. And I help them, especially if they're living on the continent, to link with good mamaki growers wherever, that they might be. Maui took a big hit, obviously, with the fires. But so link with that so they can make a nice tea. And then I'll refer to Pua Pinto or other folks that are versed in la'au if they want to get into more of that. I practice more integrative psychiatric mental health. I did a fellowship with Dr. Anna Glazer. She's up in the Bay Area. She's amazing. She's also does work with PSI. And I use a lot of things like lavender, oral lavender. So in a capsule form. I use a lot of things like Vitex or chasteberry for menstrual health issues. I also I love L-theanine. So that's that active amino acid in green tea. And so I use that a lot. I use different forms of magnesium to help calm the nervous system. Lemon balm, I love. That works really well in our population. Really, it depends on what state of the perinatal period the mom is in, whether she's in the preconception thinking about it, needs to get her nervous system all dialed in, or is she going through infertility, or is she Hawai'i pregnant already, or postpartum, and is she lactating and offering breast milk? Because these all have great effect on what transfers into breast milk, right? Or what can influence estrogen levels in the endometrium. We don't want any of that going on in pregnancy. So depending on what their symptoms are, what stage of the reproductive time period they're in, we'll use a variety of those different ones that I just mentioned and a bunch more. But it really is highly nuanced, and it also depends on what they want to do. Don't get me wrong. I prescribe my fair share of Lexapro, sertraline, Wellbutrin, all this stuff if we need it. If we need to, I explain it in a way that is going to come in and is going to help these neurotransmitters for a little bit. We don't need this forever, but it might help us. My mentor, she says, put out the fire before you rewire the house. It might help us do that. So we use those things too. But I find especially in my Indigenous communities that, we want to use other things. And also we want to use things that are connected to our people, if possible. So those are some of the things that I do. And again, always just referring out to the teachers that know way more about these things. Those are things that I try to connect my clients with.
Do you find that a lot of Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islanders are kind of resistant to Western medication?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes, 100%. All the time. It's like a given.
Yeah.
And I get that. I was as well. I mean, their relationship with the West is fraught with, mistrust and deception and all of these things. So for me, as a Native Hawaiian, person sitting here saying, well, we could use some of this. I'm going to have to do better than that. I'm going to have to, just break this down into a cellular neuronal level and show you what these different things do. So building trust with your client is super important. Sometimes, especially when you've got psychosis going on, when you've got massive amounts of OCD, my mamaki, my lavender, these things aren't going to touch that in the same way that maybe something else will. So we work together, never pushing though, just being here and being available if you want the information. I believe in that strongly, that really true shared decision making. It's not even, I don't like that term shared decision making. It's not my decision. I'm here, I did this little bit of training in this or that. Now I'll pass the knowledge to you, and then we see what we want to do together. I'll help walk with you through it, help you out, side effects, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, nobody wants to do that. People don't typically want to go into therapy because, again, those were not our traditional ways of doing things. La'a was, for sure, but the vast majority of what we see now is an absolute ramification of colonization, continued historical trauma, epigenetic transfer, blunted trauma response. You know what happens with the HPA axis and, pregnancy, with all that. So all these things are created things. And so, yeah, people don't want to use what created that to help them. Right.
Makes
So yeah,
sense.
it's so highly nuanced. I get out of a session with one of my people, and I, obviously HIPAA, I don't share, like I try to be really vague, but every time I leave my office and I connect again with my ohana, I always find myself telling my kane, oh, I love this. I love this. Like there's nothing like it. All those things on my wall, they didn't train me for this. My kupuna trained me for this, to sit and to just be with. And we have enough back and forth knowledge and wisdom to heal ourselves together. And that's what we do. And it is such a beautiful thing. But yeah, we pull in every single thing, whatever we think we need.
It's so healing to be able to be that face for your people and to be able to provide that space, almost to protect them from the system in a way. To be that option for folks, because we definitely see that. I mean, that's why we even exist as a podcast, to say this doesn't exist for our people. There isn't a space for people who look like us, who have our background, who have our shared, like you said, shared trauma. And so being able to be that, like even for the you 10 plus years ago didn't have a you to turn to get help from.
And I didn't have a them.
Yeah.
Like, so for me, like, yeah, like I sit here in this space, like to connect with folks, and hopefully like the help that I'm able to offer will help them feel better. But it's really the pilina, the relationship between her and I. Yeah. So I'm so lucky actually too, to sit in that space, because they heal me. Yes. And I, and again, it's not just us. We're working with our kupuna, we're working with all that ancestral wisdom, right? So it's just the opportunity to come together as two kanaka, maybe across the ocean, thank goodness for Zoom. And yeah, and it's just nice to be able to connect with each other.
Yeah. We did talk a little bit of just the systemic failures, the Western colonizer space that is making it hard for your folks to be able to get that kind of care. And I know there's not really like one easy solution to fix everything, but what would be some changes you would like to see happen that you think could be impactful and beneficial to other Kanaka Maoli mothers, whether in Hawaii or on the mainland?
Yeah, so, I'll just put this out there. I think the United States should go home. And I think they should give us our country back. That being said, that's not going to happen, probably. But I think we need to continue to work towards sovereignty of our aina, and to have a land base again, because it's getting back into the aina. That's really truthfully going to be the big overarching thing that heals. So there's that. That's my number one big old wish, right? But really, one of the tangible things that we could probably do quicker than that is to, just like you have, for psychologists, you have like cross-state availability to see clients, like they have that. Therapists don't sometimes, but psychologists do. It's this weird, I don't remember the name of it. But I think we need to talk more about that, so that the limited amount of Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander carers that there are can be linked with our people wherever they are across the continent or in Hawaii, without that barrier of, state barrier. So I think that would be one beautiful thing that could happen. The other thing that I think would be really helpful is to have a little bit more of a bridge between Hawaii and the rest of the diaspora, with respect to figuring out how the diaspora can get home more to heal more. Because again, I mentioned when I go home, I'm a tourist. I have to rent a hotel room in Waikiki. I would like to see, something built out or conversation starting to happen about how we could create sort of this exchange of like, when a kanaka wants to go home, how can we do that so that we can get back out into the aina, so we can get, teaching our keiki that we're raising now, our cultural practices, maybe even some that we didn't learn ourselves, right? Because we've been here for a minute. So I'd love to see that. And then I think just more conversation surrounding the need for not just what we have on paper. Again, that expert model, we know everybody's lost a follow-up. We need to improve that and continue to improve that. We're all working on it, but it's still failing us. Like, maybe you get screened, maybe you get referred out. There's never any follow-up or there's very little uptake. We need to improve those things. And then maybe the last thing would be with respect to just, I think, this time period in general, really, really continuing to advocate for leave. So many of my patients that I see, it's always at that 5-week mark, when they have to go back, and then anxiety ticks up because they're not ready and all these things. So just more leave, I think, would help so much of a lot of what I see outside of my community in general, but just specifically with, perinatal mental health and the anxiety component.
Thank you for sharing that. I'd love to link some resources that you might have for specifically Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders.
Yeah.
And also, where can guests find you if they want to inquire about your services?
Sure. So anyone can find me just online at mana, MANA, mentalhealth.com. You can go on, you'll see, like if you're in Hawaii, there's a link to click a free consultation, or along the continent, you can click and click a free consultation. I normally meet with everybody first just to make sure it's going to be a good fit, because as you've seen, I have an entirely different style. You're not going to come to me for a 15-minute, follow-up consult about your Lexapro. It's going to be, we're going to sit, we're going to bring snacks. So that's me. One of the great places that I refer moms to is a wonderful nonprofit of wāhine in Hawaii. They are called Kalena Kaopuuokalani, and I'll send you their information. Kalena Kaopuuokalani sees Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders for free, and they provide doulas, and they can actually even see people on the continent through like an iPad, so they can be with you as you labor.
Wow.
You can have, a Native Hawaiian doula with you. They're on many of the islands. They have created such a beautiful nonprofit. Every time I see them and just the work that they're doing, I'm just like, we're going to be okay. The younger people, they're coming in. So they are such a great resource. So them. And then there are a few others. Again, I mentioned Pua Pinto. She's amazing. And then another one that I really, really love, and it's challenging for folks on the continent to see her, but they can actually follow her Instagram. She gives lots of good tips for Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders, is Kealohi Naipo. She's a registered dietitian, and she just is just a solid, wāhine who offers really good information that intersects with mental health when it's talking about the things that you put inside your kino. So she teaches you how to make, aipono and all these different cultural foods and stuff on her Instagram. So those are like 3 that come to mind. There's a few others that are really helpful as well, but those would be my main ones. And then for the continent, linking with the different Hawaiian civic clubs in the areas. There are many. So linking with the Hawaiian civic clubs is so important, so that you have some tap into that connection. And then lastly, this is, you don't need to put it in your thing, but just for the podcast, if you are a settler and you are kanaka, ensuring that you know whose land you're on and go make friends with those people. You go make friends like you would back home. Go take something, go make friends, let them know you mahalo them for being on their aina, because we know how it feels, right? To have other people on our aina. Not that everybody needs to get off, but when they're there, we want, we want to know that you're going to be a safe person here for our aina. So those types of things, those things feed you, those things boost your mana. So the more that we can connect that way too, I think is vital. But I'll send you those resources so you can put in the show notes.
That was wonderful. I love those resources. I'm so excited to be able to have this, and just even being able to be our first kanaka maoli guest, and hopefully not our last, to represent the Pacific Islands.
Mahalo nui.
We end all of our episodes with a what are you going to do for your mental health this week, or have you already done for your mental health this week? So we just go around and share. I usually think about it ahead of time, and I actually have not come up with it yet. So hopefully one of you have one already.
I have one.
Okay, great.
I have been feeling a little bit, I don't know what it is, just something's been kind of off lately. And today I took some time to actually write. And for me, writing is so healing. I think that finally untangled some of the anxiety, untangled some of that discomfort. And I think really just having that time to myself where I'm not like, okay, I have to be in mom mode, I have to be in wife mode, I have to be in like housekeeper mode, or like just having a little bit of time set aside to do that really for me resets me and grounds me again. So that's mine for this week.
Yes, that's so good. I am going to oli. So oli is a way to chant, as you probably know, Peggy. I pick up my son in this rural area where he goes to school, and on the way up and on the way back, we oli. So on the way up, he olis, and on the way back, I oli. So I do that for my mental health, and that always, 100% of the time, just puts me right back where I need to be. So I'll do that. Probably just in my mind because my voice is a little gone after this week, but I'm going to do that.
That's beautiful.
It's beautiful.
Okay, I gave myself enough time to think. I think mine is not to go in too much detail, but I'm in a space where I need to I'm making a decision, but I want to sit in the in-between. This is so vague, but I guess the thing is that I'm learning to sit in the in-between, not to rush forward to the next thing, not to want to just like go, but to be sitting in a space of waiting and trying to learn what that means, to not be able to necessarily make a decision on said thing. Sorry, it's so vague, you guys.
No,
it's okay. It's like, it's beautiful.
Being okay with being in the in-between, being okay with the waiting to move to action on the decision, and being open to what lessons are being learned in that space. This is vague enough to be applied to a lot of things. So hopefully it helps someone else out there that like when we're in the in-between, we're in the space of waiting, that there is a lot of value. Actually, a really great analogy that my therapist had said was like a germination stage. You plant a seed and you're not just going to force it to grow tomorrow. And it might not look like anything is happening, but the seed isn't just sitting there. It is like doing all its stuff, but you can't force it and you just have to be present in it. I think, actually, no, she didn't say germination. She said gestation, and I turned it to germination. But in the same way in gestation, right? Like you become pregnant, but it's not like you immediately balloon up right away. You don't see it happening, but the cells are dividing like a million times. And there is a lot going on, even if you don't see it. And so being comfortable in this kind of waiting stage of this space.
I like that. I think it is going to help somebody out there. Yeah.
Well, thank you again so much. This has just been such an honor to be able to learn from you and to share. And I'm really hoping that there are many listeners out there that can relate, feel seen, feel heard, and also feel motivated to either do something differently, whether, like you said, you're a settler on this land, or do something differently if they are a frequent tourist of Hawaii.
Yeah.
Well, just to remember the history and honor the people.
Yeah, so mahalo again for the opportunity. I really appreciate you both and the platform. And it was really nice to be able to be a part of this. So mahalo nui. And
with that, This episode concludes our first season of Healing the Tigress. We have been deeply honored to share the stories of our guests and have had such profound conversations around maternal and paternal mental health, parenting, intergenerational trauma, and more. We hope our listeners have learned something from these episodes, felt a little more seen in their struggles, or found new resources they can lean into. The outpouring of support from our listeners has been truly humbling. We always love it when you share our podcast with a friend or loved one. And even more, we would really love and appreciate it if you could leave us a review to increase our podcast's visibility among searches, as we really want this podcast to reach those AAPI parents who need it the most. Please follow us at Healing the Tigress for more updates on when Season 2 returns in the fall, as well as some summer updates and teasers. We have a lot of exciting guests already lined up. Also, a special thanks to Dr. Tony Huynh for helping to sound mix our introduction dedication. And shout out to Peggy for the vocals and ukulele playing in this episode. You might remember that I mentioned in our very first pilot episode that Peggy is a singer and plays the ukulele in our Self-Care of the Week wrap-up. So I think it's really special we've come full circle to her sharing her talents in this episode. And from the bottom of our hearts, thank you for listening and following along our journey to better mental health in our AAPI community.